The following podcast is a presentation of This Is Infamous. Listener discretion is advised.
This is the Intelligent Wrestling Conversation, episode number 4 to be perfectly precise. I'm your host, as always, Billy Donnelly, who you can find at JoeBlow.com, and this is Infamous. Thanks for getting here and into the show, whether you downloaded it or streamed it, however it is you found it, whether it was iTunes or Stitcher or Blueberry or SoundCloud. I appreciate you making your way through to this show where we talk about wrestling in an intelligent, logical, and reasonable fashion. No fanboy speak aloud here on this particular show. Lots to talk about as we get into this particular episode. The original plan for episode number 4 was to talk about the Money in the Bank pay-per-view and the aftermath on Monday Night Raw. That was the plan. That was what was lined up. That was what was on the schedule. That was what was on the docket. That is what was on the slate for this show. And then, about 24 hours prior to rolling the mics, to open them up and get ready for this particular episode, something big happened. Something big happened within the world of professional wrestling / sports entertainment to actually take the WWE's most recent pay-per-view that just happened days ago and shove it to the back page. What could happen that's so monumental, so huge, so ginormous that I can't even talk about what happened at Money in the Bank right away? Well, Roman Reigns, the now former WWE World Heavyweight Champion, which we'll get into in a little bit, has been suspended by the WWE for 30 days for a violation of the company's wellness policy. Way to go, man. Way to go. This is a guy that was handed the world by Vince McMahon and the WWE. And through whatever fault of his own, could be accidental, could be purposeful. No one knows because details of the violations aren't released unless Roman Reigns wants to go forth and let people know what happened. But this is a guy who was given the world and now has to take responsibility for essentially pissing it away. Now look, there are times where things happen, but the wellness policy in the WWE, much as the policies against PEDs, performance-enhancing drugs, in Major League Baseball or the NFL or the NBA, are pretty detailed. They will tell you exactly what you can and cannot put into your body. And there are times that there are supplements or medications that may show up on the list. And as a professional, it is up to you to double check, triple check, quadruple check that whatever it is that you are taking or set to take is not in violation of the policy. There are times that waivers may be happen if it's a necessary medicine. And then there are other times where those things are just off limits. There's a supplement that you want to take that contains something in violation of the policy. Well, I guess you're just going to have to find something else. So Roman Reigns is now in violation of the wellness policy. Once again, we do not know what it is, but what we do know is that he has now been knocked off the top of the ladder for whatever mistake, quote unquote, he made. And that is not good for Roman Reigns. You know, I am a guy who has defended Roman Reigns to a point over time, because what has typically happened to Roman Reigns through his ascent to the main event has not necessarily been Roman Reigns' fault. It's been plenty of other people's fault. But I can't really put it or pin it on Roman Reigns for just doing what the company wants him to do. Is he a babyface for the company? Probably shouldn't be, but they really want him to be. So he goes out there and he does what he's told, like an employee. That's what the boss wants, that's what I'll give him. And he's gotten shit for it over months and months and months and months and months because a certain segment of the fan base does not want him to be that. They feel that he's been sort of handed his spot, not very organic, forced down their throat, and they have rejected his position in the company. Rejected his ascent to be the guy, as he likes to claim in his catchphrase, in the WWE. This doesn't help turn any of that around. If anything, this actually makes things worse for Roman Reigns than they previously had been. Roman Reigns at this point is the A-Rod of the WWE. He's a guy that goes out there, he does what he wants, or what the company asks him to do, rather. And while people have, or certain people in the fan base, have a narrative they would like to form around Roman Reigns, this just helps foster that negative perception of who he is. Alex Rodriguez, when he was with the Seattle Mariners or the Texas Rangers or the New York Yankees, was a guy and he put up numbers, but he just didn't feel right to the fan base. Felt sort of disingenuous, sort of manufactured, a little bit too polished, not real. And while he could hit 58 home runs or 145 RBIs or bat 320, there was still just something about him that people didn't gravitate towards. Sort of kept him at arm's length and said, I don't know about this guy. And then when it came out that he had been testing positive for steroids and PEDs, well, it just gave people all the more license to hate him entirely. What do you think's happening with Roman Reigns? Wrestling fans are typically pretty smart. The casual ones, they'll follow in passing, but they'll catch wind of this when they're in the stands and people start booing Roman Reigns or chanting about his failed tests. And very quickly, it'll circulate. What happened with Roman Reigns? Do you honestly think at that point there are going to be people who look favorably upon Roman Reigns? And once again, this is a guy who's been positioned as the top babyface in the company. This is a guy who they're pushing lots of merch for. With John Cena on the shelf prior, this is a guy that they were pushing as the next big thing that kids could sort of look up to. The new hero, I guess, of sorts. That narrative's gone now. Because in spite of a lack of detail as far as what this offense was, the thing that people are going to look at with him in regards to violation of the company's wellness policy is they're going to say he's a cheater. They're going to say he's a guy who didn't follow the rules. They're going to say he's a guy who knew what the wellness policy was and did whatever he needed to succeed regardless. Now, whether or not that's true or not, who knows? I don't live in Roman Reigns' head. I don't know all of his motivations. I don't know his thought process, and I don't pretend to. What I do know is what the perception of the fan base will be, and like it or not, perception becomes reality. And they're going to look at Roman Reigns and say, Roman Reigns is in the main event. Roman Reigns is the guy. Roman Reigns was the WWE World Heavyweight Championship because he cut corners to get there. He took something that he shouldn't have taken. He put something in his body that shouldn't have been there, and that helped him get a leg up on all these other people that we prefer to be in that spot anyway. So the hatred for Roman Reigns is just going to get more hatred-y, more vitriolic, more venomous. And the people that did like the guy are going to look at that and say, too bad. It's not the guy we thought he was. I mean, I'm sure there will be other apologists who say, oh, well, I feel bad for the guy, and a mistake is a mistake, and so on and so forth. But those are the people in the minority. When people slip of this nature, people already have a reason that they don't like someone, and this just further enhances that reason. They're just going to embrace it. So now you have a guy who knows where he goes next. I mean, we know what's planned for him next, and I'm going to get into that now because while Roman Reigns is still a fairly young guy, while they put a lot of investment into Roman Reigns to get him to this point, are they going to double down on that and push forth? Or is this one of those cases, as we've seen in the past, where the confidence is lost in the guy? Roman Reigns dropped the WWE World Heavyweight Championship this weekend at Money in the Bank. Going into the pay-per-view as the title holder, it appears that the WWE knew of the failed test. Now, in other cases, when people aren't the champion, they're usually suspended like that, immediately. But when you got a guy who's carrying your top prize, you try to do it a little bit more subtly, I guess. And that's what they did with Roman Reigns. They put him into Money in the Bank, and they took the title off of him. And that should have been the way that he quietly went off into the night for a little while. Shades of Rob Van Dam in 2006. Rob Van Dam was arrested with Sabu for drug-related offenses, which was in violation of the wellness policy. At the time, he was both the WWE champion and the ECW champion, and they didn't just strip the belts off of him, tell everyone he was suspended, and send him on his way into limbo with people wondering what the hell was happening. Instead, they put him on TV, they had him do business, and on successive nights, they had him drop both the WWE and the ECW titles, and then went into a suspension. Now, the deal with Rob Van Dam is that Rob Van Dam never became that guy in the WWE again. At that point, that was the height of his popularity in the WWE. He had rose to fame in the original ECW, but this was the time when he was really on the rise in the WWE, really ascending to be possibly their next big star. And then this happened, and that was it for Rob Van Dam. Rob Van Dam hung around the WWE for a while, came back periodically. Rob Van Dam still gets over with the fans, still gets pops when he comes out, still is incredibly popular, can sell merchandise, is a good worker in the ring. But as the guy, company never saw him that way again. Never had confidence in him to carry that torch for them again because they had already been burned once. That was sort of a one strike and you're out viewpoint of Rob Van Dam as a champion. Is Roman Reigns headed for a similar fate? Is Roman Reigns looked at as a guy who, he failed the company wellness policy? Don't know that we could really rely on him in such a top spot again. Because if it happens again, and I believe that 60-day suspension, really stepped in that shit pile then, didn't we? Egg all over the face. So is that the same fate? Is Roman Reigns walking into sort of a position of being a guy who can get some popularity, might be able to get over as a face, might be able to get over as a heel, but they're never going to put that title on him again. Never going to put him in the main event again. Never going to put the weight of the company on his shoulders again because, well, it happened once. So maybe we don't take a chance that it happens again with so much riding on it. Now, Roman Reigns came out the next night and competed on Monday Night Raw. Sort of a head scratcher. Why? They already knew he'd failed the test. So why put him back out there on TV? Why are you continuing to forward things with this guy when you've already done the business of taking the title off him? You've already done the business of transitioning two other people in a main event. So why is Roman Reigns still in the conversation? And that's where I think we get the hints that maybe he's not traveling down the Rob Van Dam path. Maybe they're saying to themselves, well, we put a lot of time, we put a lot of effort, we put a lot of money into making this guy who he is right now. We're going to make sure we collect back on that investment. Because on Monday Night Raw, Roman Reigns has a main event match with Seth Rollins for the number one contendership at the next pay-per-view. Battleground, which is in, I think, 5 weeks. And knowing what we know now about the violation of the policy, you would say, well, he's just going to put over Seth Rollins, and Seth Rollins will move on, and Seth Rollins will compete for the WWE Championship against the new title holder, Dean Ambrose, which we'll get into in a little bit. But that's not what they did. They didn't do that. Instead, they had sort of this double count out no decision that leads to a triple threat match at Battleground with Dean Ambrose defending the title against both Seth Rollins and Roman Reigns. So Roman Reigns, who violates the company's wellness policy, goes and gets suspended for 30 days, and then because of the way the schedule is laid out, actually can come back from his suspension in time to now be featured in the main event of the Battleground pay-per-view. Sort of curious creative decision there. And sort of a curious decision to send such a message to your locker room. Because the idea of the wellness policy is to not have people putting things in their body that they shouldn't. Not putting things in there that could be looked upon unfavorably in respect to the company. But you still have that guy in such a prominent featured spot in returning from his suspension. So granted, he violates the policy, he gets suspended, he pays the price, he does his time, whatever. But then he comes right back as if nothing happened. So is that really a punishment for violating the company's wellness policy? If someone else were in that position, I don't know, Rob Van Dam per se, and they violated the company's wellness policy, if they did not have such investment put into their rise to that point, would they be given that same benefit of the doubt? Would they be returned to such a prominent spot in the company on future cards? I am willing to bet no. If this happened with Dolph Ziggler, and we're speaking in hypotheticals, if this happened to Dolph Ziggler, and Dolph Ziggler violated the company wellness policy and was suspended, and then he had to come back, they wouldn't just be like, "Oh, Dolph, don't worry, it's like nothing ever happened. We'll just proceed as usual." So there's a lot going on here that you have to look at and say, it doesn't make a lot of sense. Granted, do I feel bad for Roman Reigns? Sure. Because you never want to see somebody crash and burn in such spectacular fashion like this. You know, it's one thing if you don't like the guy as an in-ring performer, or you're not behind his character or whatnot. I don't want to see somebody ruin their life with stupidity. But at the same time, these policies are set in place by the company to ward off behavior that they don't want. And if these things can happen and it feels like nothing happened as a result, then how legitimate is your wellness policy to begin with? I mean, he's going to pay a heavy price in the court of public opinion. That's for certain. So maybe that's where the real punishment comes in. But, you know, does he care? Does the company care if he gets booed? He's getting booed already. If he comes back and he just gets booed more, Well, then they go, well, now we'll just turn them. We'll just feed into it. And we got something. So just a real dicey situation there at Roman Reigns. Incredibly surprising. Very shocking. No one clearly saw that coming. But now that it's happened, it's a matter of, well, how do we proceed forward? And we'll see what type of price Roman Reigns winds up paying in the long run if he's able to sort of regain the confidence of the company and get back to a main event spot. He's clearly going to be in the main event at Battleground, but I would be shocked as hell if they somehow put that belt back on him with the quickness. Shocked as hell. Okay, so with all of that laid out, now we can get into the Money in the Bank pay-per-view and talk about what happened there. Because, as we laid out, for obvious reasons, Roman Reigns is no longer the WWE World Heavyweight Champion. So I guess we should, before we talk about that part of the card, we should talk about the namesake of the Money in the Bank pay-per-view, which is the Money in the Bank match. A 6-man ladder match with the winner capturing a briefcase, holding a contract for a WWE World Heavyweight title match at a moment of their choosing. At any point in time, they could cash that in and contend for the title. So in this particular match, 6 individuals: Kevin Owens, Alberto Del Rio, Chris Jericho, Sami Zayn, Cesaro, and Dean Ambrose. Now, heading into the pay-per-view with the go-home Raw and whatnot, it felt like they were leaning really heavily in a predictable fashion of Dean Ambrose walking away with the briefcase. He was the only one at that point in time who got to interact with Roman Reigns and Seth Rollins. The only one who seemed to be active in the way of teasing a cash-in, even that night. So whether or not it was a last-minute call or not, just felt like he was the one guy out of 6 who stood out as being the potential winner. Kevin Owens would be the other, primarily because of the attitude and the heat that he gets on himself. But Dean Ambrose, because you were talking about a main event with Seth Rollins and Roman Reigns, and the history of all 3 of those individuals with the Shield, seemed like the only one there who they could sort of slot right into a ready-made storyline. Now, the match I thought was pretty good, as Money in the Bank matches typically are. They're incredible spot fests. They're brutal to watch. You long for some sort of innovative or creative way of using chairs or ladders or tables or whatever they want to introduce during the match that we haven't seen before. And I thought this match provided some of those spots that didn't feel too familiar. Didn't feel been there, done that. Cesaro put on the swing, put Chris Jericho in the giant swing, and proceed to swing him headfirst into a ladder in the corner, which was just shuddering to watch. You had Sami Zayn deliver a Michinoku driver to Kevin Owens on a ladder, and I'm not talking about a ladder flat on the ring apron. I'm talking about a ladder not perfectly laid out on the canvas. I'm talking about a Michinoku driver on a ladder that is stood up on its side without a lot of give to it. Some nasty stuff going on in that match. That is exactly what they want because it's entertaining as hell. And you look at those guys and you say, man, I respect the hell out of these people for doing this thing that I would never be insane enough to do. And put forth a real effort for you. And Dean Ambrose climbs the ladder, pulls down the briefcase, and he is your new Money in the Bank contract holder. He's got the briefcase. So we skip ahead a match. Rusev and Titus O'Neil for the U.S. title. Quick and painless with Rusev retaining. And we get to the main event. Roman Reigns versus Seth Rollins for the World Heavyweight Championship. This is Seth Rollins' first match since coming back from knee surgery. Reconstructive knee surgery after basically blowing out his knee last year. So it was interesting to see what he was capable of doing because when people typically come back from those injuries, they are a little bit gun shy in their styles because they don't want a repeat incident. The likelihood of that happening your first time back is typically not all that solid, but you got to shake off a little bit of the rust. You remember what happened. You're a little bit gun shy about it. You say to yourself, can I do the same things that I did before I was put on the shelf? And I thought Rollins' return was fine. I thought the match got off to a slow start. It was nothing really special. I think they had a little bit of trouble finding their groove and making their styles mesh. But I thought it picked up towards the end. I thought they had a lot of false finishes to add some drama to the match. I thought these two guys laid it all out towards the end. Especially now knowing that Roman Reigns was going to get put on the shelf. I thought for that, he put a hell of an effort into this match. He could have easily just sort of sulked his way away knowing where he was heading, which is into a suspension. But instead, he put it all out there. So, in that respect, was a professional and did what he was supposed to do. And it leads to Seth Rollins winning the title back, the title that was taken from him, the title he was forced to vacate due to his injury, and sort of regaining his spot now as the undisputed WWE World Heavyweight Champion. The fans went nuts for it because, once again, everybody hates Roman Reigns. I won't say everybody, but a lot of people. Not fans of Roman Reigns. And then sort of the intrigue set in as to whether or not Dean Ambrose was going to come down to the ring with his briefcase. And his music hit, and the crowd popped, and everybody waited, and then here he came from the other way and blindsides Seth Rollins with the briefcase, cashes it in, hits Dirty Deeds, scores a 3 count, and now you have once again, for the second time of the evening, a new WWE World Heavyweight Champion. The lunatic fringe, Dean Ambrose. Now, I found it interesting that they put the belt on Ambrose now, because he seems to have cooled off a bit from where he was. Not too long ago. Not heading into WrestleMania when he had Brock Lesnar in front of him, but prior to that. When he was feuding with Seth Rollins the last time. At heading into Battleground, no less. Where Dean Ambrose was white hot. Fans love this guy. And primarily, it's for all the very reasons that they hate Roman Reigns. And I think even as much as they want to paint Dean Ambrose as a lunatic, he's just much more of an organic personality for them to rally behind. He's scrappy. He's a fighter. He gets knocked down, he gets up again. When he gets knocked down, sometimes he's actually hurt when he's down there, so he takes a beating. But he's resilient. Fans love that. He's a little bit off-kilter. He's a little bit unhinged. People dig that too. There's a uniqueness to him, a strangeness to him. There's something compelling to watch with Dean Ambrose. You look at this guy and you go, there's something there. I may not be able to put my finger on it. I may not know exactly what it is, but I know there's something different about this guy that makes me want to watch him. And on top of that, this is a guy who has not always had the best storylines written around him, not always been put into the best creative, and yet he has been able to make it work. And that's usually the mark of a true talent. That they take lemons and they turn it into lemonade. Chicken shit into chicken salad. They take something that on paper or at the outset is remarkably dumb, and yet they somehow make it incredibly entertaining. Daniel Bryan managed to do that. Dean Ambrose managed to do that. And usually it winds up happening with the people that the company look at and they go, I don't know that they're the guy. I don't know that they're the face of the company. But the fans just respond to them. And usually it's because they respond to the passion. They respond to them seeing them work through less than stellar creative and yet still make it work. Dean Ambrose got a potted plant over. A potted plant. Had people chanting for it. No different than Xavier Woods getting a trombone over. This guy got a plant. A potted plant. That's special. And so, whether or however we look at the means by which they finally moved to put the title on Dean Ambrose, well-deserved and well-earned from his spot. He's done everything they've asked him to do, and he's done it in a way that fans really respond to. And how could you not like that in a WWE World Heavyweight Champion? I realize he may not have the look. You know, he's an alright looking guy. He doesn't look like Roman Reigns. He looked like he was taken off the cover of a romance novel. Not built like that. Not chiseled in stone. But that's what people like about him. Kind of looks regular. Somebody they can identify with. Somebody they feel like they're on the same wavelength as. So I dig it. I look forward to seeing what they have next with Dean Ambrose as the champion. And I am willing to bet that they will get more mileage out of Dean Ambrose as their champion now than they will have gotten out of Roman Reigns, the guy that they so desperately wanted. That's how life in the wrestling business works. Otherwise, I look at sort of the Money in the Bank card and wasn't really blown away by anything. I thought there was a pretty good match going on with John Cena and AJ Styles. I thought there was a really good story to start there, showcasing sort of AJ Styles' quality of wrestling and sort of being a better wrestler than John Cena. I thought John Cena sold it pretty well as being a guy who was having difficulty with this talent who they were really trying to put over in a big way. There's one thing I did manage to pick up, and I know that there's sort of a degree of the fan base that has had a problem with this for years. It hasn't really bothered me too much, except in this particular match where it was so grossly apparent that it was really hard to ignore. You know, when you watch a wrestling match, we know it's a work, we know it's predetermined, we know these guys are still doing something athletic, but they're putting on a performance. They're telling a story in live action, right in front of us. So watching this, knowing that it's predetermined, quote-unquote fake, I guess, if you want to call it, there's still a suspension of disbelief when you watch it. You know what they're doing, but you pretend to not know because it's entertainment. When you watch a TV show, when you watch a movie, you know that they're acting. You know they're not really fighting fucking aliens, but you pretend that they are because it's entertaining. But it's when you start to, like, pull back the curtain a little bit and show that the wizard is there that you lose a little bit of the suspension of disbelief. You start to see the strings and the wires and the green screen. And in this particular match, what you had was John Cena calling spots left and right quite audibly that I thought was pretty distracting. If I can hear John Cena tell AJ Styles what they're going to do next and then they do it, it kind of takes you out of the moment a little bit. And you go back and you watch that match on the Money in the Bank card and you will hear him, John Cena, clear as day. All right, so we're going to do this and then that, okay? All right. That's not how I want to watch my wrestling matches. I want to not know. I want to believe that it's real, even though I know it's not. But for the moment, I'd like to think that it is. Not believe that it's real, only to very blatantly be shown that it's not. And then try to disregard that because I want to be entertained in the moment. So I thought that was sort of a problem with the match. AJ Styles manages to get a win after a ref bump. Gallows and Anderson come down, deliver a magic killer to John Cena. AJ Styles scores a win. A cheap win, but a win nonetheless. Of course, a decisive win would be better, but for all the people that always complain that John Cena buries talent all the time, a win is a win is a win is a win is a win. And AJ Styles got a win. In cheating to get the win, get some speed. That's what a heel should do. A heel should cheat to win. Should use any means necessary in order to get a 1, 2, 3 and have their hand raised high at the end. Now, where I take issue is with JBL on commentary complaining about the interference. This is the guy who's sort of the heel commentator who talks about how awesome Gallows and Anderson are all the time, and then complains about the fact that they were dishonorable in interfering in this match, and then tries to cheapen the win by really hammering that point home. That's not your role, dude. You have other people in your commentary team who are supposed to feign outrage over interference and how the babyface got cheated and how this is an awful occurrence. Know your role, dude. Know your role. Other than that, I look at the Money in the Bank match and it's not all that impressive. The pre-show you had Golden Truth versus Breezango, which was just an awful debacle. You have Breezango coming out in like this sunburned makeup and these awful prosthetics. Oh, it's just groan-inducing. It's face-palming. It's all bad. It's not even funny. Also in the pre-show, you have the Lucha Dragons versus the Dudleys, which just shows how far Kalisto has fallen since they took the U.S. title off of him. I was happy to see that Baron Corbin and Dolph Ziggler would not be on the pre-show as previously announced. They actually made it onto the main card. So that was at least a positive. But you open the Money in the Bank. You have a fatal four-way for the Tag Team Championship between Enzo and Big Cass, the Vaudevillains, Anderson and Gallows, and the New Day. And it was just sort of a sloppy match. You know, it's one of the flaws of having a match like this is that you run into the problem of all the teams needing to get their stuff in. And as a result, it kind of just becomes a clusterfuck. The New Day retain, they keep the belts, and on Monday night they go into sort of this confrontation with the returning Wyatt family. So it looks like that is the next direction that the New Day will go in. But where does that leave your other three tag teams? Because you kind of just undercut them a little bit in the Fatal 4-Way match. You know, where does Enzo and Big Cass go? Where do the Vaudevillains go? Where do Anderson and Gallows go next? Granted, you pair them all up with Lucha Dragons or the Dudleys, and now you sort of have a rebuilt tag team division, which is good because the tag team division has been incredibly weak as of late, but you also gotta build some stories into these tag teams and their interactions to make their matches matter and not just have guys wrestling for the sake of wrestling. Baron Corbin gets a decisive win over Dolph Ziggler, so I thought that was good in the way of sort of helping him get established. It was a very strange women's tag match between Charlotte and Dana Brooke against Becky Lynch and Natalya. Just not crisp at all. Dana Brooke feels very out of place on the main roster as sort of Charlotte's protege. However, I feel she's regressed a great deal since when she was down in NXT. Just doesn't feel like her personality is meshing right now with the women's roster. There's going to be a little bit of a feeling out point, but I don't know how long it's going to take for that to sort of get on the right track. You still have Where Is Sasha chants going on throughout all of these matches. Because following WrestleMania, they just sort of put her away for a little while. Granted, she had a concussion and as a result had to go through that, but figure out a way to maybe just get her on TV a little bit or tease the fact that, you know, she's still on the roster, because what happens is the fans feel like you're not listening to them when they're chanting for her. They're not getting anything, and instead they're getting matches that are sort of just thrown together. Now, Natalya turns heel after the fact, after Charlotte and Dana Brooke get the win. And of course she attacks Becky Lynch, because who else is there to attack? Becky Lynch has been, I think, attacked by everyone on the women's roster over the last year since she's been called up. Too much. Because all it does is makes her look gullible and kind of stupid. For once again putting her faith in somebody else only for them to stab her in the back. Now granted, there are no real other baby faces. It's basically Becky Lynch, and everybody else has sorts of shades of heel to them. But that's their fault for improperly structuring their women's division to be so heel heavy. Somebody's got to get cheers. And the other match we had on the card was Sheamus and Apollo Crews. Look, I still just don't get Apollo Crews. Is he impressive athletically? Sure, he did this incredible moonsault off the apron to the outside of the ring, but there's no character development there to make people care. So when he's wrestling Sheamus, nobody gives a shit. The arena in Las Vegas is silent. Because nobody knows who this guy is. In NXT, you didn't know who he is. All he is just a smiling guy who's happy to be here. That's his thing. Like, that's his gimmick. He's just, isn't it awesome that I'm on the main roster? This is great. It's great to be here. So there's got to be something done there. It doesn't help that he gets a fucking roll-up win. Like, how many roll-up wins do we need? Roll-ups are not a finishing move. Let him have his... You want to get this guy over? Let him do his finishing move to Sheamus. Don't have him just roll a guy up. You want a cheap win? That's the cheap win. Unexciting. So just overall, look, the Money in the Bank match is good. I thought Rollins and Reigns was good. The rest of the card, kind of just nah. Nothing too special. It's cool to have Ambrose get his moment at the end. The cash-in is pretty cool. So you have a couple of cool moments. Not nearly as good as it was last month, where I thought you just had better overall matches or a couple of really solid moments to help boost the show. So, look, we'll see where we're heading towards Battleground next. We'll see what's up next. And, of course, the draft is coming as well with the new SmackDown going live. That was already announced as taking part on the first SmackDown, so that's a way to sort of draw people in to watch that program and see where people end up. So I thought that was good creatively. But for Money in the Bank this year, kind of disappointed. Felt it was just sort of an okay show. Nothing too spectacular. Over on Monday Night Raw, a couple of returns. I mentioned the Wyatts came back. So good to see them come back. Hopefully we'll see them get repackaged and be menacing this time, as opposed to whatever the hell it was before, which are a bunch of dudes who talk a lot of shit and then get beat all the time. And then I was excited because Sasha Banks came back. So for all the chance of where's Sasha, Sasha finally came back. It looks like they're going to line her up for a program with Charlotte, at least heading towards SummerSlam. I don't know if they're going to pull the trigger just yet at Battleground. I would imagine you might get Sasha Dana Brooke at Battleground as a way to get Sasha Banks headed towards Charlotte at SummerSlam. But the crowd went crazy for her. So even in her being on the shelf for a couple of months and them not even really acknowledging her absence, the fans kept the torch lit for Sasha Banks. And when she came out, they really blew that fire up. So that was cool to see. And we'll see what that continues to do within the women's division as we head towards the draft, too, because we're going to have to see how some of these talents get split up, how the women's division is split up if there's only one title, what's going to happen with sort of the tag titles, how all of this is going to be lined up with two very distinct programs. So a lot to process this week. Not quite so simple as just a Money in the Bank pay-per-view, somebody holding a briefcase, and us figuring out when they might cash it in. Lots thrown at the wall this week with the suspension of Roman Reigns, the Money in the Bank, new WWE World Heavyweight Champion crowned twice. Some interesting returns. We'll see where things are headed. But I think right now there may be a little bit more enthusiasm for the product, a little bit more juice behind what the WWE is doing with Dean Ambrose at the top of the card, squaring off against Seth Rollins, than there was with sort of what felt like a very flat Roman Reigns' reign, Roman Reigns' babyface reign, in spite of how the fans felt about him, which was really begging, pushing, pleading for some type of heel run. I think right now they might have a slightly more intriguing program to tune into, and we'll see how that leads once again up into the draft and the live SmackDown, which comes in July. I'll be heading up to Orlando in the coming days. I will be attending the very first taping of the Cruiserweight Classic. So next week, I'll be back to talk about how that goes. I'll also be attending the next round of NXT tapings. So we'll see what's on the docket there as we seem to be moving towards Finn Balor and Shinsuke Nakamura going head-to-head, one-on-one at some point down the line. And I'll be at SmackDown next week. But we'll talk about that portion. mesh two words together that don't belong. Talk about that together on next week's show. Which I'm going to plug now as I get to go home and get ready to get you out of here and on your way. So, look, thanks for listening to this particular show. This is the Intelligent Wrestling Conversation. This has been episode number 4. Make sure you hit us up on all the social media accounts that we have. On Twitter, you want to make sure you hit us up at the IWC Show. That's the official Twitter handle of this particular podcast. So hit us up there for any comments you may have, any feedback. You could also hit at Tis Infamous. That's the official Twitter handle of the mothership. This is Infamous, where you can find this particular show listed all the time. So make sure you hit us there at Tis Infamous. And you can follow me on Twitter at Infamous Kid, 2 Ds at the end, for all my random ramblings and musings all the time. Basically my stream of consciousness put in written form. So hit me up on Twitter at Infamous Kid. Over on the Facebook, like the pages. Facebook.com/TisInfamous and Facebook.com/BillyTheKid. Good, interesting conversational threads thrown up there for you to take part and engage in, as well as notifications for all the content and shows that we put up at This Is Infamous. So keep an eye on those. SoundCloud is where you could find the podcast. iTunes is where you could find the podcast. Stitcher, Blueberry, you figure it out. You get the app, whatever podcast that you prefer, whatever means that you prefer to get your podcast. I'm sure you could find us there, but you know that already because you found us here today. So, look, just rate the podcast when you can. Give some feedback because that helps in the long run. As well as subscribe. Subscribe to the podcast however you want to get it. And this way, you guarantee that you have a brand new show every single time we put one out. So subscribe to Intelligent Wrestling Conversation to make sure that you never miss a show. You can find my work on a regular basis at joeblow.com. And this is Infamous. I have been your host, Billy Donnelly. This has been Intelligent Wrestling Conversation, episode number 4. I'm going to get out for now. I'll see you back here next week. Have yourself a pleasant, immediate future. Peace. Intelligent Wrestling Conversation, episode number 4, has been a podcast presentation of This Is Infamous.